Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's bonus episode, we'll hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you're interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the podcast for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic for social entrepreneurs because as much as we want to give our information to the world, we also need to make sure that it's protected appropriately. So today we are talking with my friend Lorraine Galvis, who is going to help me and you navigate this sensitive space. So Lorraine, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you make an impact?
Sure thing, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me on as a guest. It's always amazing to see you and to connect with you. So I'm an attorney. I'm based out of New York and Connecticut, and I work with entrepreneurs on essentially setting up their businesses and what that means, because that's a very kind of broad term. But I work one-on-one with entrepreneurs to make sure that they've properly registered their businesses with their local state authorities, making sure that they have all their proper documents in place, IRS forms, EINs, that kind of thing, helping them with some of their corporate governance documents. So that could be for most LLC owners, they may have an operating agreement, especially if they have partners. Some people are just partnerships. They don't necessarily have a formation or an entity yet, or they may be some kind of corporation. So we kind of work with them to get different documents that could be helpful in basically spelling out how their company is going to be run and the roles that people are going to take, profits, loss, all that kind of thing. You reduce it to a writing as best as you can. And more importantly, which is, I think, one of the, topics that you want to talk about today, we talk a lot about branding and what that really means. It's a very broad term, but branding is not just, here's my brand and, here I am. There are really some important legal steps that you need to take in order to secure that and to make sure that no one else can use this branding that we all become very emotionally attached to. And sometimes that emotional attachment doesn't let us realize some of the steps we need to take to protect it.
That's so fascinating because I was just thinking about all of the things you get attached to when you're a business owner, whether it's a look or a feel or a voice or any of the things that you think are sort of the persona of the brand. And
Right.
when you're off brand, people notice. But if you are, trying
Yeah.
to create a business, you're probably doing things like getting a logo, having even fonts that you use regularly, all of these things. And I guess we just don't think about that these things are actually important information that are part of our business. So can you explain just this idea of protecting some of the things you're creating and why would you care about protecting a font, for example, that you use all the time or a logo that you've created? Like what is this aspect of your business owning about?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. And I think it can get very, very in the weeds for a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of us, business owners, I say, because me and you, having these initiatives and running these businesses, we tend to be very creative people. We tend to be very scrappy and resourceful. And so sometimes our focus is really aimed at being able to afford services and have operations and sell a product or service that can essentially allow us to make a living. And so I think our focus is on the financial aspect of running a business because that's really where I think that's where we feel the heat first because it's so expensive to launch a business. So one of your priorities is really, okay, I need to eat, I need to pay bills, I need to keep this business running. And unfortunately, the legal aspect of that, what most of my clients don't realize is that the legal aspect of becoming an entrepreneur, it is a legal transaction. Deciding to open your business, deciding to be a brand, deciding to sell a product or service or host your own podcast or create content using your name or your image or your brand, that is in and of itself a legal decision. And you may not see it as that. You may just decide to leave your job and start a business, or, sell your business and start a podcast or be a speaker. But that is all at its root a legal transaction. Why? Because it is going to affect the taxes that you pay and how you report those taxes. And it is going to affect your ability to hire people, fire people, grow your business, sell your business. These are all decisions that all kind of are rooted in legal. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is is bringing the legal aspect into that process as early as possible. So you made a great. I love that you mentioned logos, because most of my clients are, I got to pay the graphic designer. I got to do this. I got to get this. They're designing a special font just for me, and it's mine because I paid the graphic designer for it. And it's not that straightforward. There are some things that are what we call proprietary. That means that those are things that you own, or you have the ability to own, or have exclusive rights to at the minimum. And there are things that are not. None of us own Times New Roman, but the way that we maybe use Times New Roman in combination with other artwork or other things that the graphic designer could be something that we could legally protect. And also, by the way, hiring the graphic designer in the first place, these tend to be very common transactions. No one's really thinking about, I need to get a release from the graphic designer so I can make sure that I own what I'm paying him or her to design for me. They're just thinking about, send me your invoice, I'll pay you, and then you give me my logo and it's mine. It's not that simple sometimes, depending on what business you're in. So really, I always tell clients, think of a legal transaction as just your due diligence list, your checklist. You're doing your homework on every step of starting a business. And just the way you have a tax person or an accountant, you should have a legal person just kind of, blessing your steps and just double checking everything that you're doing.
They like the term "blessing your steps." It's like it just gives you this whole like Godfather vibe. But I when I was first starting my business, the first business coach I encountered said
Mhm.
I needed a CPA and a lawyer, and I went about looking for lawyers and not understanding what I was getting. One of the first lawyers I encountered was pitching me a package
Mhm.
on trademarking,
Right.
and it just didn't understand why this was so early in our interaction, something that she was talking to me about, and I was like, "I don't even have a business yet. I don't even have anything to, like, trademark. I don't have anything to copyright, like, I don't even know,"
Right.
and it was very expensive package, right? So, it's a well, not a I don't wanna say a premium service, but it's not a service that the average bear goes about and purchases, right? But if,
Right.
as a business owner, you should be thinking about these things because you are putting together things that are unique to you. So, can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about who might need to be protecting their information? Or, like, how do you know if this applies to you or does it apply to everybody? Like, how does that work?
It's a great question, Wendy. And I'm glad you asked that, because I want entrepreneurs to understand something. My clients are very smart. They have great common sense. You are a very talented woman. You have a great show. You have great guests, and I find you as a very reliable source of information. Um, and I think entrepreneurs don't give themselves enough credit. When you speak to a service provider, if they're a licensed professional, whether they're an accountant or a lawyer, and you know that you need their services, just because they're a licensed professional doesn't mean that you don't get a right to interview them, to ask them questions, to tell them, hey, can I speak to some of the other clients that you've worked with? Because I'd like to learn from them what your work style is, to see if it's a good fit. I think that I would much rather see more clients be more selective and do their homework, because you are right. Some of those first initial essential legal steps are expensive, but it's also the lawyer's job to help you understand what you're buying, right? So if I'm offering a service and it's Greek and you have no idea, and I'm just telling you, you need it, and oh, don't worry about it, you need it, but it's $5,000. At the very minimum, my job is to make sure that you understand what you're buying, why you need it, and what the potential benefits of that are. So same thing as you would go to the doctor, right? And say, I have this condition. I'm wondering if there's a better treatment, or I don't like this medication, or I don't like the people at the front desk. They never pick up the phone. That's called client service, customer service. And that's our job. Our job is to make sure that you understand what you're buying and that you feel comfortable making that decision. And by the way, if you are talking to people that are not doing that, don't buy from them. I could say that because we really pride ourselves, at least myself. I really don't feel comfortable selling my services to a client that seems to be in the dark or is just like, I just want to do my trademark and get it over with. Can you just figure out the rest? And I usually don't work with clients like that because if things don't work out the way that they anticipated, what am I going to say to them? Oh, well, you didn't want me to explain. And I'm just going to take your money and we'll just see what happens. I mean, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it to the best of my ability. But I don't want a client that's disappointed or feel like they invested a bunch of money and that they didn't understand, even if it doesn't work out, that they understood the risk. We can't ever guarantee that people are going to get approvals, right? We try our best, but it's always a risk that things may not turn out the way we planned. But hold your vendors accountable, and if you really want to work with them, but you're just not understanding what you're getting, email them again, call them again, ask for a follow-up call, ask for a follow-up meeting, ask for a video meeting, ask them to send you, hey, I may not be articulating things very well, but I do have a couple clients that I worked with that are doing something similar to you. Let me see if it's okay to connect you with them. And I think it might be easier to speak with a peer. Two restaurant owners will understand each other. Two fashion designers will understand each other and what they need. And that only helps my business because it helps build the community, but also my clients have a community within themselves, right? And then they can also speak to each other. So, be selective and there's another good word for that. Not take initiative, be assertive. Be assertive when hiring your service professional because that's their job. That's their job.
Yeah, it is hard as a service-based business when you're first starting out because you have to figure out what are those services, how much do they cost, and sometimes it's not a great comparison for your services. So,
Yeah,
especially if you're creating your own IP and your intellectual property is part of what people get access to. Like even in my business with my coaching and my consulting,
right.
pricing things is like it takes
Hard.
sometimes it's all my brain capacity to figure out
Hmm.
what is fair, and
Yeah,
it's like fair to the client, fair to me, fair to the outcome, like all of those things. I can appreciate what you're saying. And I think what I've learned in this, I think a couple of years now, we're almost getting to 3, so 2.5 years in
mhm,
business, is that having the team, like you're talking about this approach of service providers. I mean, every business cannot operate by itself.
right.
There is no way you can do all the things, payroll, insurance, like everything yourself. You can't broker every single service. So you end up interacting with other business owners a lot. And
Right.
I have a really great team through my chamber of commerce that I've been able to access. I also have a really great team, which a lot of podcast listeners might know because they hear me talk about it through the FinCon community that I go
Right.
to, which is where you and I know each other from,
Hmm.
in that group of service providers that really focus on financial literacy and financial independence. And so I am very blessed as a business owner to have these wonderful networks of people that I can go and get services from or even exchange services with. But I think
Right.
even some newer business owners are not used to hiring, say, a lawyer. It might be intimidating. So can you
Hmm.
speak even a little bit about like how do you approach finding the right fit for you with a lawyer in particular that is going to be able to do these things you're talking about, starting the business, doing your copyrights and your trademarks and your other things? Like how how
Yeah.
how do you find that right person for you? Because you mentioned work style and a couple other things, but I just wanted to really hit on.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point, Wendy, because, there are plenty of talented professionals out there. There are plenty of talented lawyers, talented accountants, virtual assistants, all kinds of service providers. But really, in my experience, what makes a successful relationship is that ability to find the right fit between you and that person. If you find the most brilliant attorney in the world, but they have a horrible personality or they don't return calls or they're arrogant or they're just not, meshing well, as one of my interns correctly uses, like, oh, Lorraine, we just don't mesh with that company. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Let's find someone else that does mesh with how we do things. That is really important because any professional relationship is like any other relationship. You're probably going to be dealing with this person for quite a long time. So you want to really give some serious consideration to taking certain steps with service providers. My first point of contact is always similarly situated businesses. So if I'm in the podcast business and I see other podcasts that I really like and I'm following them and I love their production, I'm probably reaching out to that producer or that team and I'm asking them if they can refer me to who their legal is or who's doing. And I've actually done that and I've had people say, we were using this person, but we're not using them anymore. Right. Or we were using them for 5 years and we switched up or something happened or we went in a different direction. But I would always, always go through personal referrals first. And once you do go through personal referrals, chambers of commerce are also very helpful. I am a member of my local chamber of commerce here where I live as well. I'm not as active as I'd like to be, but I think it's also seasonal. And sometimes, depending on where you are, it might feel like they're more salesy people there because they're all there to network. But that's why I think personal referrals or even cold calling and asking people specifically, "Hey, I love your show. I've been watching it for a year. Would you mind giving us a referral to who handles your legal or who handles your production or who handles your bookkeeping?" And when it comes to services that are maybe unrelated, like legal or accounting, anyone with a successful business, if they've been doing it for a long time, if they're consistent, like someone like you're posting consistently, you're meeting consistently, y- you are showing that you are able to be operational. I think success is probably not the right word because how do we measure success? But I think we can measure consistency. So if you are following a podcast of someone that hasn't posted in a year, this person is probably still trying to figure it out. So as much as they're trying to give you a good referral, they themselves have not been able to derive value from those relationships. So you can't really measure the value of those relationships based on the person that referred you because they haven't even used them. So I would definitely start with personal referrals. Last resort, maybe you want to try a local bar association or honestly, Google reviews are excellent. The more specific you can be on Google, I look up reviews for service providers and I will put a specific phrase, end of year book reconciliation for IOLTA accounts. And if the word IOLTA pops up there, it will probably only pop up with like 2 entries for accountant. But as a lawyer in my field, I know that means that that person has experience with a particular aspect of my business when it comes to accounting. So be very specific in your phrasing if you're shopping online and always ask for professional referrals. So even if you find a lawyer you like, say, hey, can you connect me with 2 or 3 clients that you work with that you've done this specific type of work before, trademarks or contract drafting or business formation or dispute resolution. And I want to talk to them and find out from them how it was like working with you. You can be honest because if you have nothing to hide, I believe that. You have nothing to hide. None of that should. I'm more than happy to make connections between my clients because it's all here. And so that will also help drive the relationship in terms of confidence. You're going to feel better about someone that's being transparent as opposed to a provider that's just not listing their prices or trying to hide the ball or speaking in code, which is very frustrating as well.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the whole thing about chambers of commerce, and I think there are a lot of people who think, and I used to as well, think that it was just like a room full of old businessmen sitting there selling things to each other. And like, knives and every, I mean, I had no idea what happens at a chamber of commerce, but it is very
Yeah,
interesting as a business owner. Once you do get into it, you understand how networking works. And one of the things I've learned is, doing social media and doing referral based business with existing clients or existing networks as a small business is great, but
right.
once you can unlock that selling and really scale up the way that the big businesses with the salespeople who are there pitching you things every day, like that's a scaled business because the business owner is not the one there selling you the product. It's their
Definitely.
person, their representative.
Hmm.
And I've had to really understand and appreciate and try to apply that same thing to my business or my service-based business to see like what would scaling look like or how can I have these ambassadors to what I'm doing so that I can operate like a scales business. And I think that that's something
Right.
sometimes as like women or small business owners or even minority business owners, thinking big and thinking scaled business, it can be scary. So I just
Oh,
was,
yeah.
yeah, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're a minority business owner, you're Latina. How have you navigated this? Like with growing your business, you mentioned an intern, you have a team. How are you growing and scaling as a business owner?
Yeah. Wendy, it's really hard. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have been super successful at scaling in terms of size. What I have been really focused on is learning to manage and delegate. So, like, for example, one thing that my practice has always really been dedicated to is having legal, we call them legal externs, but it's essentially a law school intern every semester. And that does create extra work for me because I have to train this person. But guess what? In training them and teaching them, I'm also learning how to be a COO, how to be a CEO, how to be in charge of firm operations and management, how to do HR, how to talk to people that work for you when they're not delivering the way that they're supposed to be delivering. And in the summer, we pay interns. So we've had great interns. And I think I have nothing to say about my interns because I've been really lucky, but, part of my job is not to always praise them. It's also to tell them when they're not doing something correctly. And when you're paying someone to do work for you and you also have to guide them, it's a huge responsibility. It's huge. So for us, at least for my practice, I'm the only attorney at my practice. So I don't have a partnership with any other attorneys. But what I've been able to do is leverage relationships that I have with other attorneys in other spaces. So when our clients have more needs, we are able to do things like fee split agreements. There's also a platform that I use that also allows attorneys to kind of share work, refer work, and it makes it kind of intuitive to be able to split fees so that we're not spending so much time trying to figure out how to pay each other. And interns, I think, are a very undervalued, very resourceful way to scale your business. And I would also think outside of the box. I've had interns from technical school. I have had interns from law school. I have had undergraduate interns. And I've even had a remote, actually, my niece, and she was in her last year of high school and she had like a capstone project, but she worked for me. She gave me like 200 hours that year, which is a lot of time if you think about it. If you think about how long certain tasks take you, and there's an intern at the school that needs 180 hours in order to graduate, 180 hours times $25 an hour. I mean, you do the math. And this person just needs to do it in order to be able to graduate. But you could literally teach and give them whatever you need. So I really believe in the power of mentorship. That's how I learned a lot about business skills. And, I had these, more seasoned mentors that took me under their wing and allowed me to be a sponge and learn as much as I could from them. I also have I call mentors on speed dial, which are very seasoned people in their fields that are very, at an expert level of what they do. So maybe they've been business owners or they've bought and sold businesses. I met a mentor at FinCon that way. He's been buying and selling businesses for over 25 years. So this is someone that is seasoned in all things business operations. And now I have the ability to just email him or call him and say, hey, how do I do this? Or I'm in this situation. So do not, take care of your relationships. Don't underestimate the value of these experts that you meet. And I mean, me personally, I lean toward very older senior people. So, the more I have a lot of white hair, but whoever has a lot more white hair than I do, like I just lean into them because they are so wise and everything you're trying to do, they've probably done or seen done 50 million times. And the best part about it is that they're usually willing to offer their advice for free, unless consulting is their business. But that is like a real gift. And I would strongly, recommend banking on some of those relationships in that way. And I also think technology, I'm still in a position where I'm learning to leverage new technology. AI is obviously at the forefront of that because we're all learning that now. But to the extent that you can vet your vendors every year, take a look at your vendors, see if your applications are really being multi-useful if you're really fulfilling the functions, because I was at a point in my business where I had 5 different applications to achieve one thing. Like calendars is one of my pain points. So I had Calendly, and then my Zoho Mail, and then my Gmail, and then my iCal, and then they all have to speak to each other. And it was taking me an hour or 2 hours a week just to figure out my calendar, and I'd still miss meetings. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not dealing with the calendars anymore. I'm going to hire a virtual assistant that's a little bit smarter than me. And for that small investment, she can just centralize everything. So literally that was a recent hire. And that's what I'm working on now. Just simplifying my systems so that I can do more with less, if that makes sense. So scale can be defined in many ways was my point with that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned calendaring because I think that when you're working a 9 to 5, people often tell you where you're expected to be or give you some sort of choice about meeting times and whatnot. But when you have your own business and you're a service provider and you have clients and they're like, "We need to meet," and you're going, "Okay, let me fit you around this other things that I already have committed in my life." So I can greatly appreciate that.
Yeah.
With you as a person, just in this journey of helping people, how did you start? How did you know that this is what you wanted to do? Like, tell us a little bit about your origin story and how you decided to be really passionate about helping people with their legal problems of all things.
Yeah. So I think that the law, I don't think, I'll be honest, I don't think that running a law firm is something that I wake up every morning and say, I want to run a law firm. That was never like a dream. What was a dream and is still a dream is just being able to be of service, being able to help people. And I realized early on in my career, I got my start in the music business, in the late 90s, working for record labels when there were actually records. So if anyone remembers what CDs are or cassettes or vinyl, I was working in record labels that actually companies would actually make music and sell these devices and these tapes, right? I feel old. But that's how they generated a lot of money and tours and all kinds of things. And what I noticed working for the music business was that law was at the center of every single decision of every part of the day. Can we feature that logo on this flyer? Do we have a license for that? Did we ask permission from Sony to include, to include so and so's photo in this advertisement? Did we, get the right, agreements in place for this tour? Do we have everybody's riders? Like everything seemed to be a business question, and it was, but it was also really like a legal issue that no one knew the answer to. And eventually someone had to call the lawyer and be like, hey, we have this trademark. We got this weird letter. Supposedly we have these photos, but we have no clearance, and we want to be able to post this ASAP, et cetera. So I realized that being a lawyer, I could just be a part of these really important transactions and really be able. The hardest thing about my job, which is my challenge, right, is seeing people on the other side completely perplexed. There could be a very simple legal thing that they need to do, but they're scared. They feel silly that they can't articulate what they need. They feel that they need to impress me somehow because I'm a lawyer and they think that I'm judging them. And, and I don't blame them because a lot of lawyers hold themselves out in this way that people don't feel comfortable telling them, hey, I don't really know what a trademark license is. I have a trademark and this person wants to pay me, but they're saying I have to sign a license or, they're saying I have to send them something. And I don't know what that is. And the fear that paralyzes some of the people that I speak with, that's why I do what I do. That's why I do these podcasts and these appearances, because my goal is to really make I can make all lawyers more approachable, but I can make this lawyer more approachable. And to let people know, like, you're not stupid. You are far from. You're an entrepreneur. You started a business somehow and you had the fortitude and the wisdom to do that. And now you have the intuition and the wisdom to know that you need a lawyer. That's a really big realization. Because I have a lot of people that they know that or they ignore it or they just choose not to pay attention to it, right? So a lot of it could be very, deliberate. But more likely than not, I see that people really need my help. So I think from when I was in law school, I worked for a lot of companies and I was always on the problem solving end of things. I grew up in Harlem. I grew up in the inner city. My parents are from Central and South America. They came here in the late 60s and 70s, and I was born here. And so, first to go to college, first to go to grad school, right? First to be a lawyer, first to practice law, first to open a business in the United States. So there was a lot of pressure to really perform. And so for many years, I think that that's what I was trying to do. But as being 9 and 10 years running a law firm where I'm finding my joy and where I'm finding that the work is really meaningful to me is where I can help people that are just really just trying to learn how to build something. And I want to be a significant or a meaningful part of that. And I think I owe that too to watching my parents struggle. When a lot of Latinos come to this country, they don't speak the language. And so you're the kid that went to school here. So all your family members are like, mira, léeme esta carta. Read this letter. What does this say? What does this person want? And they're able to transact everything, but that language barrier can be very challenging. So I think at a young age, I was reading a lot. I was trying to problem solve. I was being very clinical with letters that I was reading and trying to figure out what we needed to do. And my parents held me to a high standard. They're like, well, you were born here. You're by default, you're smarter than us because you went to school here. So you have no excuse. And that's how our parents raised us. There was no room really for um, laziness or imperfection or, you better figure it out because we didn't have those options back in our country and you have plenty of options. So you have no excuse. In hindsight, I'm very grateful to them because they really held me to that high bar that I can now hold myself to when I'm trying to help my clients.
You brought up so many interesting conversations that we've had on this podcast with other guests too, especially Latino parents, of this idea of being sort of that golden child and having to
Mhm.
interpret or being empowered at a young age to be in conversations that you had no idea what was going on, but you're just sort of back and forth. And I can appreciate the being the first in your family to go to college and then go to grad school and to have sort of these career achievements, longevity that you're working toward. And it does feel pressure, but I think it also feels celebration. Like you mentioned, your parents are probably extremely proud of all the things you've been able to accomplish. I'm sure your family loves that they have a lawyer that's
Yeah.
accessible to them, not only to us, but to them as well. And so, I think that there's appreciation in your effort,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that you shared that story with us because it is a really great personal story. And you mentioned too people getting confused and thinking, "Oh, I'm silly bringing you, lawyer, this conversation that I don't fully understand, or this paper that I shouldn't, as an adult, know how to read, but I don't." And I can appreciate that. And I think that you
Mhm.
mentioned also people probably don't even know the difference between when I need a trademark or when I need a copyright or why either one exists. And so I figured that might be a great place for us to start as we're starting to like kind of wind down this episode.
Yeah.
What is the difference? And which one do you choose when? Do you need both? Like, I'm sure there are a lot of very tangible questions you can answer there.
Yeah. No, so I want to start this response by saying there are lawyers for a reason. So for your listeners who feel that se la tienen que saber de todas, todas, that's what my mom would say. But what that means in English is like, you don't have to be a jack of all trades. You don't have to know everything when you're an entrepreneur. You just have to know who to go to for help when you're trying to figure things out. So if you find an attorney that you like, and you're understanding what they're explaining to you and you mesh well and you have a good rapport and they return your phone calls, those are questions to bring to the attorney. And the reason I'm answering it this way, Wendy, is because you would be surprised how many of my clients get so caught up in those terms. But wait a minute, you explain the copyright, but the trademark works this way. And I already registered my LLC, and they will just completely convolute these terms that have nothing to do with each other. They do, but not in the way that they think that they do. And then they put themselves in a position where they are playing the lawyer and they lose focus of what they're doing as an entrepreneur. I've literally had clients lose sleep over this. I've gotten texts at 3 in the morning, like, Lorraine, I still don't understand this thing with the trademark and the copyright and like, and so I could spend your money explaining it to you, or I can just give you legal advice, which is what you're paying for. And you can just trust me that I know what I'm talking about, that I know what you need to protect certain aspects. So I just want to put that out there because that's very important. Now, very briefly, the distinction between trademarks and copyright. They are literally just separate legal protections. So if you can imagine, um, you you have a business and you put out you have photos and you have providers that are doing photos for you, they're recording video for you, they're recording audio for you. These are vendors that are creating content for you, but you're paying those vendors, so by default they work for you, and that work is something we called work for hire, right? So you as the employer, you as the person paying them, you own what these people are producing for you. So we might use copyright to protect some of that content, whether it's a podcast show, whether it's a collection, a season of episodes, right? And it's all this work that you've either scripted or not, or your show notes, or anything that involves your pen touching the page, or your paintbrush touching the canvas, or your sounds or music touching the digital software that's then going to be reduced to an MP3 or an audio file. So when we're talking about content in and of itself, we are probably talking a little bit about the copyright system and how we can use those legal protections to protect certain aspects of your content. Trademark is a different sort of legal protection, and that really addresses the way that you present yourself to the world. So, for example, I'm Lorraine Galvis, but the name of my firm is Galvis and Company LLC. My brand is Galvis and Co. Right, and that's pretty much on all my platforms. And I do have a registration in the applicable class for legal services. What does that mean? That means that under trademark law, I hold exclusive right in my industry class, in my field, legal services, to use the name Galvis and Company or Galvis and Co. Right? So if there's another Galvis and Co. in the US providing legal services and they are using that name, using that brand to sell the same legal services, I can send that person a cease and desist letter, which everyone here listening probably hates or doesn't like or has seen at some point in their, business career. I will send a cease and desist to that person and say, hey, by the way, I am the trademark owner of Galvis and Company in the class for legal services. And I own the rights. I am the only one entitled to use that name in connection with legal services. Now, there could be a Galvis and Company coffee shop somewhere in a remote part of the country, and that person might be able to get a registration, but the likelihood that they will, it's probably something that I'm going to say no to because it might cause confusion among some of our, people getting legal services might also like coffee. That would be my argument anyway, right? But the fact that I own that trademark, when I say own a trademark, because that can be a misnomer, trademark means that you have reserved exclusive rights to use that name or to use your logo in connection with your particular good or services. So, that is the distinction. So really, we're just protecting a different thing with trademark than we are with copyright. So I hope that clears things up a
It
little bit.
does. And then, of course, there's also the patent eventually. So, but
And
this
then
doesn't,
patent is
yeah, because I'm a whole other bag. Yeah, I know. I agree. I love
Yep.
that. That's
And I
great.
will add something quickly for patent, Wendy, that I think all your listeners should know. Not all attorneys are licensed to practice patent law. So for those of you who are looking for a patent lawyer, a very important question is to ask them, are you licensed to practice patents? Because IP attorneys are not always licensed to practice patent law, but a patent attorney can probably practice trademark and copyright law. So they're not always
Mm.
equal and the same. So always ask if they are licensed to practice patent. A trademark or IP attorney who's not licensed to practice cannot help you with a patent application. So it's very important.
Yeah, no, that's a great distinction. I actually kind of inherently knew that, but didn't have the words for that. And I
Yeah.
think I knew that because not every copyright trademark attorney does do patents as well. So you
Correct.
do have to find a specific person. That's awesome. Well, I'm excited that you were able to come and chat with us today and make that distinction for people. Hopefully that's been helpful, even just the general understanding of why legal in your business is so important and all the different types of things that a lawyer can help you with so that you don't have to worry about them or stay up late at night wondering, what do I do with this letter? Or how do I respond to this request? So, like, there's so many reasons why a
Yes.
lawyer is your friend. So having your neighborhood friendly, approachable lawyer is good. Asking all the questions that we mentioned earlier, seeing who vibes with you, all of those things are important. So can you tell us just a little bit, if people were interested in working particularly with you, how can they reach you? Where can they find you? And might they reach out to you for?
Sure. So most of my clients or people who are interested in working with me are interested in having me help them form their businesses properly, depending on what state they're in. So that would be forming an LLC or forming an S corp, which are kind of the more common formations with the clients that we work with. Or they're asking us more so of the time, how can we apply for a trademark registration for our logo, our slogan, a jingle, so there is a combination and a myriad of things that you can actually apply for that people don't realize. Maybe we're getting inquiries for people that are interested in copywriting, maybe collections of their shows, collections of their music, collections of their photographs, or some kind of contract matter. So maybe you are hiring vendors or you have independent contractors that are working for you or employees, and you need to be able to make sure that you own all the right to what they're doing for you while they're working for you. So we do a lot of, releases and that kind of contract work. We also get called a lot. Recently, we've been doing a lot of appearances at community colleges, just for entrepreneurship programs or incubators. And they always just want someone to come in and just talk about legal tips for students so that they are kind of buyer beware. And then they're, kind of keeping, you know, um, they're keeping in mind some of the legal things that they may need to do as they're developing, projects or getting investors interested in some of the projects that they're doing. So those are some of the things. We also I spoke at FinCon. So we're doing a little bit more of that kind of work, just kind of public speaking. And I have a website, galvisandcompany.com. So you can find me on there as well. And we're also on Instagram at Galvis and Company.
And you do offer consultations so people can book your services. So people
Yes.
can go ahead onto your website and get that information. All
Yep.
right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of my wonderful friend Lorraine, who is here telling us how to make friends with your lawyer as a business owner. So I appreciate that so much. Thank you for being here, hon.
Thank you, Wendy. Really appreciate you. Can't wait to see you again and connect.
Yes, absolutely. All right, everyone. Come back for another episode next week and we'll have another amazing guest. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any information we discussed in today's episode, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking that out and clicking on any of the links that seem amazing to you. If you need support building your business or your nonprofit, book a one-on-one call with me. The link's also down in the show notes. Thanks for being part of the Social Impact Level Up Collective, and get ready for Season 3 coming up this spring.